And what about Esperance de Tunis? Are the Tunisian champions any good? Do they have a chance to get out of the group? We're going to preview Esperance de Tunis, the Tunisian champions who won a double, up next on the African Five-A-Side podcast. Hello and welcome to another episode of the African Football Report on the African Five-A-Side podcast. I'm your very, very tired host, Maher Mezahi, and this podcast, of course, is brought to you by africasaCountry.com. We've already spoken about it over the last few videos, but I'm going to keep plugging it until the festival is over. We have a very cool festival coming up in Nairobi, Kenya from June 21st or June 23rd to June 27th. The real main event is June 27th when we're launching our first physical edition. If you can't make it out to the festival, maybe you could do your piece by helping us out by buying one online. But if not, if you can make it out to Nairobi, to Kenya, it would be a pleasure to meet some of you in person. Anyways, as you can see, I'm not at home. And as you can see, I'm very tired. I am currently in Philadelphia for the FIFA Club World Cup. This is the Airbnb. I landed maybe 4 or 5 hours ago, and I think with jet lag, just woke up. So the plan tonight is to head to the Esperance versus Flamengo match. I saw a bunch of both of sets of supporters yesterday on the airplane and in the train station. I'm expecting a good atmosphere. I'm going to be at the stadium, of course, and then we're all, to remind you of the schedule, tomorrow going to Mamelodi Sundowns versus Ulsan. After tomorrow, Wydad versus City, and then 3 days from now, El Ahly versus Palmeiras before flying over to Kenya. So I'm going to be vlogging all of that in addition to, previews and analysis as we're doing now. Anyways, enough talk. Esperance de Tunis. Lemkeshkhin, as we say in Arabic. Lemkeshkhin, if you ever see on their logo, there's like a boy that's laughing. And as a result, in Tunisia, Kishkin means like the laughing ones, because they're always laughing, because they're always happy, because they're always winning. So very fitting nickname. They are the kings of Tunis. I mean, especially if you go post turn of the century, really, since 2000, I believe they've won 17 or 18 out of the last 25 Tunisian titles with a bunch of cups and, of course, a couple Champions Leagues as well. So that said, I'm a little bit disappointed in Esperance. You know what? If we go back 10 months, they were my pick to win the CAF Champions League. I had in my mind thought, they qualified to the CAF Champions League final against El Ahly, which they lost. They only went and brought in maybe the best attacking footballer on the continent, Youssef Belaili. They brought in Elias Mokwena, a seasoned veteran South African international. They kept on to a hold of their Brazilians, Rodrigo Rodriguez and Yan Sassi. They brought in Abdraman Konate, one of the best young talents from Cote d'Ivoire, in that number 10 position. They brought in a Nigerian midfielder, very young, very talented, Oneche Agbelu. So you're thinking yeah. And they had a bunch of young talents as well that was ready to take the next level. 1 year ago, we were talking about the Tunisian goalkeeper, Aman Lahmimish, like he was going to be a star in Europe and the leader of the national team and club. So for some of those reasons, I picked them to win the CAF Champions League, really because of how good their transfer window was. Now, obviously, I think they were probably one of the more disappointing clubs in the knockout stages of the CAF Champions League. So how did we go from that prediction 10 months ago to where we are now? I think there are 3 main reasons, 3 or 4. Number 1, they suffered a bad amount of injuries. Number 2, I think maybe we overestimated some of their talent, especially in defense. And then finally, the failure to buy replacements for those injured players. So if we talk about injured players this year, Roger Aoulou, the Togolese tall midfielder that's really, really good at sort of sweeping up any mess in front of the defense. And not just that, he's also a leader and somebody that has a lot of experience playing in the interclub competitions. He was up practically from October until the end of the year. Yassine Maria, their captain and their central defender, plays the ball out very well from behind. Very good organizer and efficient communicator. He done his knee ligaments, I think, 2 weeks into the season and hasn't played since. And then Rodrigo Rodriguez, the Brazilian striker. For him, it was more nagging injuries, and it was one of those where he had a spat with the board prior to the season starting. And because of that, we also thought maybe he's just doing this to leave his club. There's times when you're so invested in the club where you get willing to risk little niggles and little injuries to give your club 100%. And there are other times where you say, you know what, this club, I don't like them anyways. They're not, I want to leave, they're not accommodating me. I'm gonna look out for myself. If I have the slightest strain, I'm not gonna play football. I'm not saying that's what he did, because obviously as a journalist you can never infer something. I mean, you cannot state to do something like that, but I think you can infer it a little bit. So I think because he was malcontent, he didn't really give it his all. But if you look at it, that's a striker, midfielder, and defender, central defender, and that's really like the spine of their squad last season. So the injuries was a big problem. And then maybe we overestimated some of their defensive talent. Amanullah Mamish, Raid Bushniba, Mohamed Amin Tugay. I think we thought that they were better than they were. Bushniba scored a goal in the semifinals versus Sundowns last year. We were talking about him like the next top Tunisian right back. Amanullah Mamish was nominated as one of the top 10 goalkeepers on the African continent, just like 21 years old. We were talking about him as one of the best younger African talents. That's not to say that they can't rediscover what they were last year, or to say that they're bums, because they're not. But we had them very highly rated, and we were expecting them to be young players that would take a next step and take the team to a next step as they develop as well. And that didn't happen. Finally, failure to buy replacements. Look, if we talk about Roger Aoulou, the Togolese midfielder, he had a natural replacement in Onoche Egbelu, the young Nigerian destroyer in midfield, who he just signed a 2-year extension at Esperance de Tunis. Very, very good player. Just needs to improve slightly in his passing, but very, very good. Rodriguez, the Brazilian striker, didn't really have a replacement until winter time. Ashraf Jabri came in, and he did a good job. And now I expect him to. He's really made the position his own. He's going to be competing with Rodriguez for that striker position. But for the first half of the season, they didn't really have anybody there, and they were sort of experimenting with false nines like they did against Mamelodi Sundowns in Pretoria. Sometimes they'll play Beleli up there, sometimes Yansas up there, sometimes Makwana up there, and it was just never really felt natural. But the biggest mistake in terms of not replacing players was the center half, Yassine Mediah. I don't understand it. Esperance fans do not understand it. Nobody watching this understands it. It makes zero sense. He's out for the entire year with a very bad ligament injury in his knee. You say, okay, you know what? We have a backup center half, Hamza Jalasi. But now you only have really like 2 center halves. You don't have any depth, because he was the third center half and third and only center half. So you have Mohamed Amin Tugay, Hamza Jalasi. Hamza Jalasi yes, he's older. He's like maybe 30 years old, so he has experience and everything, but he's not on the level of those other two. And yeah, I would even argue that he was partly responsible for the firing of some of their coaches, like the Romanian coach Laurențiu Ragnikov, because they're making too many individual defensive mistakes, and he was a big part of that. Him and the goalkeeper Mamish. So he was never fully replaced Yassine Mediah, but you're thinking, okay, he's okay as a third center half or a fourth center half. Let's bring in, a star player in the winter. And they just didn't. They brought in a right back, they brought in a striker, they brought in all kinds of players, and they didn't bring in center half, and it's just completely incomprehensible. I'll never understand. Until now, I don't understand it. And to compound matters, we go into the Club World Cup, and they don't buy a center half again. So we're going to the Club World Cup with Hamza Jalasi and Mohamed Amin Tugay. Again, Tugay he's physical enough and aggressive enough to maybe do an okay job defensively, even though I have big questions about his distribution. But Hamza Jalasi, like, maybe he's gonna prove me wrong. I hope he proves me wrong. But that's one of those where I don't understand it. I think Esperance fans don't understand it, and they're very angry at the board because of that. I think that single-handedly ruined their season. There's 2 things that ruined their season. That not replacing Yassine Mediah in defense, that ruined part of their season. But then I think the principal reason for the entire season derailing, it goes back to the owner and the manager, the president, Hamdi Al-Madab. He was too impatient pulling the trigger on these coaches. They start the season with Miguel Cardozo. Mamelodi Sundowns coach Miguel Cardozo. 2-time Champions League finalist consecutively, Miguel Cardozo. Not to say that Miguel Cardozo is Pep Guardiola, but he's a good coach. I mean, especially now that we're looking in retrospect, right? Fired for like nothing. Yes, they started the season a little bit slowly. I think they drew maybe 3 out of 5 matches or 4 out of 6 matches or something like that. Wait a little longer, man. Give him 2-3 months. He took you to the Champions League final last year. Have a little bit of patience. They pulled the trigger too quickly on him. They brought in Laurențiu Ragnikov. Immediately, he gets them winning. They're thinking, okay, they're winning matches. They're scoring more goals than they were under Miguel Cardozo. Okay, this is fine. But then he starts conceding. Again, because he doesn't have a starting center half, and you didn't replace it for him. They fire him 2 weeks ahead of a huge quarterfinal match against Mamelodi Sundowns in the African Champions League. Two weeks. And then they bring in Maher Mezahi. Okay, Tunisian coach, local coach, who I think initially was supposed to be interim, knows the club very well, I think, as a player and coach. But give him time now. That's the only thing I would say. Give these coaches time. The short-termism in North African football will be the death of certain clubs, and proof is in the pudding with Esperance de Tunis. Maher Mezahi started the season off slow, started his stint off slowly. Of course, I thought they were very, very disappointing against Mamelodi Sundowns in the CAF Champions League. Struggled with a little bit of a few results, but I think they're on a 10 or 11 match winning streak to finish the season, and he finished with the League Cup double. So now let's give him some time, please and thank you. And please, 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 in the summertime, let's reinforce the defense. That would be a big, big help. Anyways, as mentioned, Esperance de Tunis, they won a League Cup double. That's a hell of an accomplishment, and not many clubs do that, even though they've been dominating in the league. Um, the failure to strengthen the squad prior to the tournament, as I mentioned, angered fans, not just in defense, but elsewhere as well. You had two different approaches in this Club World Cup. You had the Al Ahly approach and you had the Wydad approach, which was to sign as many players as possible, big names, marquee signings, even if it's just for this tournament. And you had the Esperance and the Mamelodi Sundowns approach, was to just sit on your laurels and go into this tournament with the squad that you have. So who's going to start? What's the probable lineup for Esperance Tunis? You have Bashir bin Said in goal. He'd take that job from Aman Lahnamish halfway through the season and he never give it back. He's also the starting goalkeeper for Tunisia. And he was always brought in, I think, just for this, because they knew Mamish is young, could be risky. Let's bring in a veteran goalkeeper behind him that's very, very good as well. That could either save us or that could just teach him the ropes, and he's had to come step in and save them. So Ben Said is going to be starting. Left back, you have Mohamed Amin Ben Hamida, who's a vice captain. Just like him and Ben Ali, the two fullbacks, are just like, I just call them unspectacular is the adjective I would use. They're very solid, very dependable, very reliable. They're good at the air. They're good at everything, but they're not great at anything. The center half pairing is going to be two guys who I mentioned is going to be very aggressive, good in the air, will slide tackle you, take out your shins. But his distribution and his passing, I think, is woeful for a player that of his quality that could be starting for the Algerian national team if it was any better. And he's going to be partnered by Hamza Jalasi, who I think we spent already 2-3 minutes lambasting. So I'm probably not going to. I'm probably going to leave him alone right now. The double pivot is going to be Ogbelu and Genishi, or Ogbelu and Hussam Tqa, I think. One of those two. Genishi and Ogbelu is like, he's a wrecking ball. In midfield, he has that special ability like N'Golo Kante, like Aliou Dieng from Al Ahly. Like, if they're within a meter of you, they find a way to suck the ball out. You know, like almost magnetic. You know, they will dispossess you. Now he also needs, like Aliou Dieng, needs to work on his passing, and that's really what's going to separate him from being a very good player at the continental level, like Aliou Dieng, and somebody that can go and excel in Europe. But the rest of midfield, it just feels very to me. You know, like it's Ogbelu, Tqa, Ogbelu, Gnishi, which is okay, and then Shihab Jbali has been mostly starting matches in midfield as well. Like, I would prefer Abdurrahman Konate, but I guess he's lost favor with Maher Kenzali, the coach. So for me, the perfect lineup would be Ogbelu, Tqa, Konate, Belaili, and then Mokwana. I've always preferred Mokwana to Yansas. But what I think is going to happen is Ogbelu, Ganishi, Jbali, Belaili, and Sas. And he's probably not going to start Mokwana, who I think had 75% of the season was incredible, on the level of players like Yusuf Belaili. And then he sort of fell off towards the end of the season. And then he's sort of lost the coach's confidence, which I don't understand. The Esperance fans, they still want him back for another season. They still like him. They still respect him. But I think he's lost his place to Jan Sass a little bit. Striker is either going to be Rodrigo Rodriguez or Ashraf Jabri, but whoever it is, I prefer Ashraf Jabri, but whoever it is, they're going to have to do a great job being efficient. Contrary to what Al Ahly were, they have to be efficient here. So yeah, the probable lineup, the one that I think the coach is going to have, I think has a lower floor. A higher floor and a lower ceiling, but I prefer my version with Konate, Mokwana, Jabri, which I think has a higher ceiling and a lower floor. So yeah. How are they going to do in terms of the group stages? They're obviously in a group with Chelsea, LAFC, and Flamengo. I saw a few Flamengo fans at the train station yesterday as well. Makes me really jealous sometimes to be a fan, you know, like, I'm watching these matches. I'm taking notes. I'm thinking about how I'm gonna cover it. I'm thinking about I have to be on the BBC in 2 hours. I have to charge my batteries for my camera. And these fans, they just come with their friends. You know, just like the Flamengo fans that I saw, they were 6, 7, like 40-year-olds. They could tell they had to talk it through their wives, maybe, or just then maybe they didn't even tell them. Said, you know what, I'm going with my friends. Boys trip out. And yeah, they just like they were having like so much fun, like making fun of each other, taking videos, taking photos. And it really made me jealous. Like I just want to be a fan sometimes. But I digress. Chelsea, LAFC, and Flamengo. Not an impossible group to get out of, I think, if you're Esperance. Difficult group, but not impossible. Maybe more difficult than El Ahli's, which has Palmeiras, Porto, and Inter Miami, but maybe not as difficult as Wydad's, which has Juventus, El Ain, and remind me who the third one is. I always forget. Manchester City, of course. Um, I think Flamengo has the biggest budget in South America. I think I read that. They have players like, I think, Gerson from Marseille, who's a hell of a player, still playing with the Brazilian national team. I think them and Chelsea will be the favorites. Flamengo and Chelsea. LAFC are probably the most realistic side that you can maybe beat. Um, but they're not bums either. They have, of course, the Gabonese international Denis Bouanga, who people tell me is the best player, even though they have players like Olivier Giroud in the team and everything. But Bouanga is the player that is most consistent and shows up the most for them. So yeah, I think they can get out of this group, but I probably rate their chances at around 20-30% to do that. I don't think they're favorites to get out of the group. My main hopes are still on Mamelodi Sundowns and Al Ahly, even though they drew the first match against Inter Miami. So yeah, Esperance, again, 11 match winning streak. I just don't believe in the ceiling of this side under this coach without the reinforcements. So, not impossible, as I mentioned, but I don't see them getting out of the group stages. Anyways, we'll leave it there for now. I'm going to start setting up all my camera equipment, start vlogging this. Yeah, I'm going to get ready to enjoy the match, do a little bit of analysis on the BBC World Service. If you want to listen to Focus on Africa today, the podcast, you can hear me talk about the Club World Cup. Other than that, yeah, speak to you all very soon. Peace.